Hey guys, it's Adam from Lucipixel and welcome back. I'd like to share another personal story with you today. A story that actually goes way back into my early childhood. And the reason being, I realize, especially today, looking back, that this period in my life has in many ways defined who I am today. And it's a story that I know that you, especially you artists out there, will very much be able to relate to. So let me take you back, all the way back to kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2. Well, back then, back in those early years, I was a very athletic kid. Played soccer, played hockey, got into intercity sports, had a lot of fun. My mother, my single mom, had to take me and my sisters to sport practice and games all the time. She did it all on her own. And I played sports all the time. 3-4 times a week sometimes. So I was in shape. I was a very healthy kid. I was a very athletic kid. So naturally, when I was in school, when it came to sports, games in the playground, any of that kind of stuff, I was always invited. I was always the first one that kids wanted to pick to be on their team because they knew they had a winning chance if Adam was on the team, as well as my friends who were also very athletic that I played sports with. If there were, sports in gym class, I was always the one in front of the pack. I was a very healthy kid. But then at a certain point, things started to change. The world of sports started to change. It was no longer about having fun and the team spirit and all that kind of stuff. It started to become a lot more competitive, a lot more aggressive, and it started to get a lot more jockey, something which I very much was not. So I immediately started to feel alienated. I immediately started to feel like this is not me anymore. It stopped being fun for me. And after about a year of giving it my best shot, giving it my best effort, I told my mother I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't like it anymore. And she said, that's cool. You gave it your best effort. You tried it out for a year, even though your heart wasn't in it. But if you still feel you don't want to do it, then cool. I respect that. And she didn't sign me up for sports the following year. And I don't regret that. I don't regret not going back into sports. Looking back, I realize now it would have been a big mistake. For me at least. Not for anybody else, but for me in particular, I felt it would have been a big mistake. And it was due to that decision that some of the best and worst moments of my life started to materialize. For starters, I might have stopped playing sports, but I didn't stop having a athletic appetite. And if you combine an athletic appetite with a Polish grandmother who babysat us a lot because my mother was studying computer science at the time, I started to pack on the pounds pretty fast. If you combine, if you think about a kid who's used to playing sports 4 days a week, and I was down to 0 sports a week, and grandma's pierogies and naleśniki with sour cream and bacon bits and icing sugar all over pretty much everything she ever cooked, and a grandmother who encouraged me and praised me for eating. Adam, such a big appetite, such a good boy. Oh, my sisters couldn't finish. You can't finish the food? Don't worry, give it to Adam. He's such a good boy. He always finishes his plate. So you can imagine little Adam making his grandmother proud, packing on, plowing through 6 or 7 plates of pierogies. And then, of course, my Polish grandmother would go into the kitchen in private with my mother and say, your son's starting to get a little fat. My mother would say, well, stop shoving food down his throat. That might help, That's my grandmother for you in a nutshell. So I shot up very fast, and I became what my grandmother would call a very plumpy boy. And I was quite a plumpy boy. And that followed me all the way into high school. But that period where I was chubby, that period where I was little fat Adam, or big fat Adam, because I was a tall kid, especially compared to the kids in my class, my popularity that I'd grown so accustomed to disappeared very quickly. A lot of the friends that I had, my athletic friends, turned their back on me. They wouldn't invite me to their birthday parties. I wouldn't get invited to play games in the yard. I got bullied a lot. Life just got really crappy for me really quickly. At the same time, however, I made a very big discovery. And that was one day there was an art competition. I might have even mentioned this in some of my earlier art talks. There was an art competition, but I knew that if people knew who did the drawings, I wouldn't have won because I wasn't a popular kid at the time. But it was an anonymous competition. So there were no names next to the artworks. It was for a scholastic book competition. There weren't any names next to the drawings. They just had a little folder with a number. And you had to vote for your favorite drawings. I voted for my favorite artist in the whole class, which was my friend Daniel. I idolized his artwork. I always thought he was amazing. But nobody knew who did my drawing. And mine was about soccer, because it's the only thing I knew. And it was a drawing of a boy who kicks a soccer ball, and it pierces through the clouds, and it flies over the sun's head and back out the other side. I remember that drawing. I'd love to see it again one day if it's lying around anywhere. Probably not. But I won. They picked my drawing. And I realized, at the same time that I was realizing that I wasn't the popular athletic kid, my artwork was being recognized, not only by them, but by me, which is ironic because my mother was an artist. And even though I grew up in a very artistic family, my mother was studying computer science at the time. So I saw her paintings on the wall, but I didn't see her produce artwork that often. But I was discovering myself as an artist. I went from being somebody who is very socially popular to being somebody who is very introverted. And I was at conflict with that because I was used to being treated a certain way, and I was being forced to not fit in, which at the time felt terrible. It felt horrible. Bullied, picked on, alienated. But what it was actually doing was forcing me, teaching me to discover myself, discover my view of the world, of people. It allowed me to be more of an observer, which is so important and has played such an important role in who I am looking back. But I didn't feel that way, not at the time. And despite my ability to draw, and despite the fact that people were starting to identify me as being a very artistic kid, which followed me all the way into high school, until today, of course, right? I continued to regard it as a negative thing. I didn't value my art. It was just a way for me to keep my mind entertained, to keep me feeling some feeling of fitting in. But I hated myself for what I had done. I hated myself for gaining all that weight. I hated myself for being unpopular. So after my first year of high school, where I wasn't particularly popular in my first year of high school either, I decided one summer to get serious about my health, my appearance, my nutrition. And both for good and bad reasons, I decided to do whatever it took to lose weight, to get in shape. I changed my nutrition. I did it the healthy way. I didn't starve. I changed my nutrition. I started running. Seriously, I would run, and I adhered to the strictest schedule. Every 3 days I would go for miles and miles run. Even if there was a blizzard and there was snow up to my knees, I would run. I would, wear 3 pairs of socks and a pair of running shoes and, 4 pairs of sweatpants, and I would go running. Even if it was at 3 a.m, I would never miss a run. I changed the way I ate. I changed the way I dressed. Everything about me. And I remember finishing, I think it was my first year of high school, being around 235, 240 pounds. Confided I was probably around 6 feet tall by then, or if not close to it. And I came back at the end of the summer, weighing about 175, 180 pounds, which looking back is a dangerously fast weight loss. But I did it. I lived to tell the tale. I wouldn't have done it that quickly, looking back, but I did it. And I came back, and half of my peers didn't even recognize me. And I walked back into that school with a tan, a new haircut, new clothes, lost weight, the whole bit, completely transformed. But I walked back in to that school with a very different perspective on the world around me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was an introverted artist's perspective. Not a jock, not a popular kid. I took an outcast perspective, an analyst's perspective of this newfound popularity, because that's what came. People looked at me differently. They treated me differently. They smiled at me differently. They were more attentive. I had girls who showed interest in me. I had some boys that showed interest in me. It was a very different world. But being who I had become, due to my forced unpopularity, it didn't mean a damn thing to me. Because I had experienced being rejected by those who I thought were my friends. It forced me to develop a deeper sense of community and a deeper sense of true friendship. It allowed me to observe humanity from the outside and develop a deeper understanding of what distinguished quality from quantity. It made me respect and admire people who went out of their way for the betterment of others rather than the betterment of themselves. And despite the fact that I had now access to whatever popularity and whatever came from it, I rejected it. And the friends that I made in high school from that day forward, and for the rest of my life following that, were people of quality. And those were the people that I gravitated towards. And those few people were the people that I hung out with. And that came at the cost of my global popularity. I hung out with, not always, but very often, the rejects, the outcasts, the weirdos, the eccentrics, the people who were too loud or dressed funny, the people who were, who had personalities that other people would consider too chatty or high energy or too wild or too introverted and quiet. Those became my friends. It only later on, much later on, when I got into college and I started to surround myself with other artists, that I realized there were a lot more of us out there than I thought. But I was also realizing at the same time that even in the artistic community, there are different types of artists. There are authentic, true artists, and there are jock artists. It's a funny thing to say looking back, but in every art I've ever experienced and explored, or a lot of them, be it dance, be it painting. There are people out there that get into that particular career, that get into that field to express, to communicate, to share. And there's other people that get into that community to dominate, to impress, to compete. And those aren't artists. Those are jocks, in my opinion. Ballroom dancing is a good example of that. As you know, if you followed my channel, you know that I'm very passionate about dance. I'm very passionate about, started off doing swing dance for many years, and then I got into jive, rock and roll dance, and then I ended up getting into salsa, Latin dance, bachata, merengue, salsa, that kind of stuff. Mostly salsa. And in Cuban community, in the Puerto Rican community, in New York, salsa is a form of expression. It's the way the body feels and moves. It's the texture of the earth. It's how it feels inside your body. It's visceral. It's almost a religious experience, how music moves you. It's a spiritual wave that travels through your body. And then you've got ballroom, which is the opposite. It's, body tight suits and tight hair and gaudy makeup and paint by numbers steps, and it's garbage, in my opinion. And if you're a ballroom dancer and you love it, then wonderful. It's a great sport, but it's not an art. And I hate to sound like a snob saying this, but this really is truly my honest opinion. There are different categories of artistic expression. There's different categories of people in the visual arts, but not all of them deserve that artist title. To me, an artist is a communicator of the heart. Even if you can't do it yet, even if you're in the process of learning the technicalities and you haven't gotten to the point where you're expressing yourself emotionally yet, that's one thing. But when you try to pit one artist against another due to their efficiency, their speed, how well they can execute a particular style, is treating art like a sport. You're being a jock. You're not being an artist. And it needs to be recognized as such. I've been reading all of the comments that you guys have been writing on my videos lately. One in particular that's really, really connected with a lot of you guys is my social media one, which you can see just by the number of comments. I think it's over 500 comments on that video. 99.9% just the warmest, most wonderful messages. And every now and then, and you know who you are because I've read them, every now and then I read a comment from somebody who expresses a very deep, very personal relief hearing that message from me, from that video, expressing that you needed to hear it because for so many years in your life you felt like an outcast. You felt like you didn't belong. You felt alienated from this industry. You felt you weren't good enough. You felt incompetent. You felt your personality sucked. You weren't interesting enough. You weren't good enough. Whatever. It's just you needed to hear a fellow artist, somebody who you might regard as being, quote, there, because I have a YouTube channel and because I run a school and all that jazz. Hearing from somebody in a more senior position at my age saying that I've been there and I've experienced it, and shedding that light on that subject, you express this feeling of thank you. You're the first person to ever make me feel like I belonged. And just like I've expressed in earlier art talks, I'm sitting there going, isn't that ironic? That an artist is saying that. And when I read that comment, and if you're listening to me, if you're one of the people that wrote that comment, one of those comments saying and expressing that you felt like you were an outcast, you felt like you didn't belong, it's not because you aren't as competent as everybody else. It's because you're an artist. And that's a good thing. In fact, that's exactly where you want to be. And I'll go on to say, I'll elaborate on that and say, if you have a hard time and have always had a hard time fitting into common everyday suburban lifestyle or fitting into the popular crowd, again, I reiterate, it's because you're an artist. You don't fit into regular society, not on that level. In many ways, yes, artists are probably some of the most fun, enlightening, open-minded, easygoing people out there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when it comes down to the real nitty-gritty. I'm talking about the personal you, the introverted you, the observant you, the quiet you, the feeling you. I'm not ashamed to say that I very often look around at society, the corporate world, the suburban world, my neighbors and the neighborhood that I live in, and I don't dislike them. I'm not an antisocial person in that sense, but I pity very often people who unfortunately don't see beyond the superficial world around them. It's meaningless. It has no depth. It has no substance to it. To me, the substance of a human soul is so crucially important to me. And again, I'm not a superficial, judgmental person, but there's more to life, to me, on a spiritual, personal, emotional level than what a lot of this mainstream media tries to present to you. The perfect home, the perfect tech, the perfect wife, the perfect husband, the perfect shoes. None of it really means a damn thing. The things that do matter are the connections, the deep connections that you make, the spiritual moments you have with other people. And again, by spiritual, I'm not saying religious, although maybe it does mean that to you. I just mean that deep, meaningful connection that you make with other people. Understand you're an artist. As an artist, you live inside this ecosystem. This is at the foundation of who you are as a person. And as such, again, I don't want you to feel alienated from the world around you. I don't want to create the cult of artists. But what modern day artists don't realize is you are different. You're wired differently. There's a reason why social media, the corporate world, industry, society, relationships, homes, clothing, why the mainstream version of everything that I just mentioned are usually not what defines you. What defines you is how you as an individual redefine it as your own unique form of self-expression. You do stand out because your uniqueness is what defines you more than any other person in the world. You have to understand that as an artist, take pride, thrive in an environment that celebrates your uniqueness. Understand that the fact that you are not like everybody else is what makes you amazing. It's what makes you who you are. It's what defines you. And whether or not you ever get that perfect home in that perfect location with the perfect car and have the perfect friends can and will never hold any true meaning to you. Being Mr. or Mrs. Popular is not what you're about. And this community, this society of artists, this industrialization of artists in modern studios, turning art into a bureaucracy, goes against the very nature of who we are. And as an artist, as an observer of this, at this point in my life, looking back at my life, what made me an artist was being forced to be an outcast. Those bullies, those jerks that alienated me, that hurt me, that ridiculed me. Not to any great abundance, not more than anybody else has ever been bullied, but those people pushed me into a corner that I belonged in. I needed to experience being alone. Artists thrive in their lonely space sometimes. Not always. Too much of that is not healthy for anybody. But we need to be left alone to our thoughts. We need to be bored. We need to dig inside our imaginations to find a form of expression. And very often what it is we express is a reflection of our observation and our feelings about the world around us. And we have to learn to accept and embrace those feelings. We have to learn how to have integrity. We have to learn how to be open about those feelings, which is one of the reasons why through the course of history, artists have been always the most open and liberal and accepting to people of every different walk of life, every gender or transgender. We are open to authenticity and we reject superficiality. And treating art like a sport is not artistic. It's superficial. Now, does this mean that you're a loser and an outcast and you're destined to be alone? No, it means true quality takes time to achieve. And by that, I'm also referring to the society, to the community, to the friends that you make. Friends for the sake of friends are meaningless. Friendship should be a quality affair, a long-term affair. Having one great friend or 2 or 3 great friends who do truly understand you and truly get you will always hold 1,000 times more value over fitting into the big popular gang. It might sound like a very superficial message to share with you, but you need to hear it because social media is the popular gang, isn't it? It's designed for a much more superficial society. And that's not you necessarily. Most likely not. But you're frustrated, aren't you? You're burning out, aren't you? Because you're not being accepted. Your artwork's not getting likes. Your social media posts are being ignored. Your YouTube videos are getting no views. It's because that's not you, and it never will be. You're something far greater, far more beautiful, far more meaningful. And when you discover what meaning you have and the beauty that you have, as a unique, outcast, loner loser, whatever it is, when you discover that, you'll never be alone again. And the world that you've always wanted to live in, and the friends you've always wanted to have, and the community you've always wanted to be a part of, they'll find you. Because there's nothing more beautiful and more attractive to the world around you and to the people around you than people who are authentically happy with themselves. I mean that. It took me a long time to discover that. And it was a discovery that I made at the very early foundations of my life without even knowing it. And looking back, thank God I got fat. Thank God I had no friends. Because if it wasn't for that, I might very well still be that kid chasing after the popular crowd. I still might have been that kid chasing after that perfect brand new IKEA couch. That's not me. My couch is an old ratty piece of crap. Actually, that's a bad example. I hate my couch. It's a piece of crap. I gotta get a new couch. But it doesn't matter. At 40 years old, let me tell you something. It's amazing how many people I've met my age, families, couples, with kids, the whole bit, that had it all. They had the house, in a beautiful neighborhood. They had the 2.5 kids, the Winnebago, beautiful cars, brand new garage, kids' brand new tricycle in the backyard, basketball net in the front, just the whole perfect little superficial picture of the perfect happy little fucking family. And after well over a decade of them pretending that everything was okay, surprise, surprise, their relationship dissolved. They got a divorce and everything was lost. Back to square one. And they were devastated. And they'd come to me and they'd call me and say, Adam, I'm completely lost. And I would turn to them and I'd say, buddy, you just been found. Don't run away from this feeling. Don't go chasing after the next Miss Right now. Look for Miss Right. Or Mr. Right. Take your time. Build something beautiful with your life. Don't chase after a quick fix. Realize that you're meant for something more. You're here right now because you put yourself there. You forced yourself to be on the brink. And as the expression goes, it's not until you're on the brink that true change ever has a chance to happen. Remember something. You're an artist. You're not a jock. This isn't about competition. This isn't about overcoming your adversaries. It's not being about faster or cuter or skinnier than the person next to you. It's about being more authentic. It's about being more observant. It's about being able to touch people in the most authentic way possible. Don't ever forget that. All right? So, thank you for joining me. For the 2% of you out there that are still listening, thank you for sticking it out this far. And yeah, hopefully I've helped to open your eyes to a little something as well. I know that this is a subject that probably occupies a lot of your thoughts. So hopefully I've helped to shed a little bit of light on that and help you out. All right, so as always, thank you for joining me. I love you all and happy painting. Take care.